Hey friends, welcome to the Canyon Pathways podcast, where we invite you to live like a son and lead like a father. Canyon Pathways is a global community of men on the journey from the striving of servanthood to the freedom of sonship as we traverse the canyon that is midlife leadership. My name is Noel Boucher. I'm the founder and part of the leadership team for this venture, and I'll be your guide throughout this podcast as we explore and discover what it means to live like a son so we can lead like a compassionate father. This is our first episode, so I'm eager to share a little bit of the Canyon Pathway story here today and communicate the larger vision that's been revealed here in this intro episode. And that begins with welcoming and introducing my longtime friend, Luke Smith. Luke, welcome, brother. What are you looking forward to as we launch this?
I think it's a privilege, Noel, number one, just to be with you as friends and brothers and get to talk together again. And hopefully we have some thoughts that provide some help for other guys that are experiencing the same struggles that we've gone through, and also the same hopes and dreams at this stage in midlife leadership.
I was just thinking I haven't done the math yet, but I think it's it'll be 29 years. We're coming up on our 30th anniversary of friendship. So that's pretty exciting, man. Glad to be here with you. And we're going to share a little bit of the story with everyone that's gathered here with us. But, it's interesting reconnecting with you as a friend, reconnecting with some other men in our lives that we actually hadn't talked to in years, is what catalyzed this. And I think as we really dive into what it means to live like a son of God, and especially in this stage of life, this is what we're going to discover, that it is coming back to tables. It is returning to tables that perhaps we've walked away from either out of pain or anger or simply have left on mission. Returning to these tables that really are central to living like a son. And I'm excited to explore that with you today. You've talked a lot about tables, man, and you've set a lot of tables. And through the podcast, we'll explain, I think, or we'll discover the depths of what that means for you to set a table. But what does that mean to you, man? What's a table look like? What's it feel like?
The first thing I keep thinking about, is why do we even reconnect? When you were just talking about that, that's interesting. So in other words, we got massive time gaps where we're not connecting, and suddenly you are connecting. Something about that is deeply of the Lord that has nothing to do with us, where life circumstances, so some of the resourcing and things that maybe we started to call each other back to and say, hey, I need help. There's a lot of different places we could have gotten help. I just think maybe it's way bigger than us. Maybe it's not just something we were wanting. What if the Lord was actually calling us to something, calling us back to each other? And maybe there's something that's just wired into us, that there are tables that are safe places that are still calling us back to them because we need it. And in midlife leadership, I think that's, without even paying attention to it, maybe I was scared. Maybe I was like, I need to get to a safe place. And so here's someone I trust in the core of where I'm at with this particular need. I don't need a stranger. I need a friend. And I need a brother right now. And so just thinking about calling you back and reconnecting, that's love that just happened, and that wasn't an accident. It felt like partnership. It made sense in some of the stuff that we were doing. It just made sense. It wasn't really even about just friendship. It was about partnership. And then realizing, no, there's a way deeper need, and the deeper need is friendship. Yeah. So that's where we are.
I agree, man. And we'll come back to that story, that chapter of our story together, because I think it's really important. It did catalyze the Canyon Pathways community, which is now a global community around the world after these first few years here. But, the first time we met, I was the one who needed help because we were both freshmen. I guess you were a sophomore on the team at State. We're teammates. And I go into, one of our first training tables, got my food for fall camp. And I asked one of the coaches, hey, anybody who loves God here among all these heathens? And he said, go find Luke Smith. Go sit next to him. I needed a friend. And I found you, and you've spoken into my life over the years, and that's how we reconnected, really in 2018. You needed some help in some ways that I could provide, and you called me up and said, hey, this film you just executive produced called The Heart of Man, our community needs this. Hey, you're doing some equipping of parents in the digital age. We need this. Come on up. And it was out of that reconnection after probably 10 or 12 years that, we're now in the midst of a matrix of relationships that's spanning the globe, something we couldn't have perceived where we are now. Canyon Pathways was not even a glimmer in our eye. We reconnected, we came to the table, and things happen when you do that. Things happen. And that's something in midlife that I've discovered. We're so into all the things that add up to the grind of midlife leadership. We're in marriage. We have kids. We have maybe aging parents. We have clients, customers, constituents, congregation members. And we're just taking care of so much. We're serving so many people that all of a sudden we look up and we're like completely isolated. And some of the friendships and relationships over the years that have sown into us and formed who we are, it's been all of a sudden 10, 15 years. And I haven't talked to that person and I haven't connected with that person. That's part of what this is about. And great things happen when we actually take the time to return from the far country of isolation back to the table. And I'm grateful for you opening my eyes to that. Well, that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's what we've experienced. We've journeyed through canyons, through valleys of shadow, and we've been to mountaintops together. And that's what we want to do. And that's what we want to reflect on this podcast. So, if you're new to Canyon Pathways, if you're discovering us through this podcast, if you haven't been to the website or you haven't been on a retreat somewhere around the world with us, haven't been to a gathering or through our one-on-one spiritual direction journey or seen any of our other content, you're going to get a feel throughout this episode of what we're about. If I had to distill it down to 3 things, here's what Canyon Pathways is about: sonship, midlife, and words. And here's what we mean by that. 1, sonship. Romans chapter 8, we'll come back to some other references to this, but this has been our discovery in our journey. All of the creation is crying out, not for more servants of Christ, but more sons of God. And that is our first call, is to serve. Son came to serve. Jesus came to serve. How did he come to serve? As a son, as an heir. And that was never shaken, no matter what was going on. And I think that's what that text is getting at, that the world doesn't need more servants, more people serving, grinding, earning, taking care of. It needs more sons and daughters, more heirs who are receiving from the Father, and out of that overflow are bringing abundance and aid and comfort and encouragement and fruit into others' lives. That's been a big revelation, and that moves into the second concept, which is midlife. Midlife, and especially midlife leadership, where you're leading people. You now are in a place where there's influence, no matter what your industry, no matter what professionally you're doing, no matter what your family situation actually looks like, you have influence. If you're in your late 30s, 40s, 50s, you're an influencer. And that's a blessing, and it's an opportunity, and it's a joy. And it can also be a grind. It can also be a canyon. It can also be a place that's isolating and lonely and dark at times. And that's what we're speaking into, is this midlife season. We have so many ministry outlets for college and for young professionals and young marrieds, and then in retirement. And there's this whole gap where you're in midlife. We're just getting asked of, because we might have resources, wisdom, finances, understanding, connections, opportunities to serve, and it becomes a grind. So we're speaking into this midlife journey. And then lastly is words. We know that the power of life and death is in the tongue, is in language, is in communication, is in words. And we love words here at the Canyon Pathways community because of that, because it brings life, and because that life can overcome some of the death that's been spoken over us or that we have experienced in our life. So we're going to explore words. We explore what words really mean. We dig out what these concepts really are that start to emerge. Luke, just as an intro, since this is the first episode, full disclosure, I was an English major when we met in college, and I taught English, and then I went to law school. I'm a lawyer. So I love words, and we deal in words, and you have helped me understand that as a pastor, as a minister, as a brother who's anointed to speak life and bring life in so many ways. We're going to deal in words, and that's going to be a focus of these episodes, is pulling out concepts and digging into what's really being revealed. So thank you for encouraging me in this journey as we built out a library of words that now are speaking into this sonship in midlife. So with that, let's start moving towards this concept for this episode. This first episode, we're going to do what we just talked about, which is pulling a word out and kind of exploring it. And the first word that we're going to look at is retreat. And we're going to look at it for a couple of reasons. But one of the reasons is that's how Canyon Pathway started, was a retreat. The concept of a retreat, and then an actual retreat that kicked it off. And Luke, I'll just piggyback up on what you said earlier, just to kind of, as we converse and dialogue and bring everyone up to speed. You and I reconnected after many years in 2018. We were hanging with our friend Brian, in his living room after a weekend together. We hadn't seen each other in years. And I tell everyone when I remember that, I hadn't laughed that hard in a decade, at least. I mean, there's just like, you never laugh as hard as you do with old friends. I mean, it's just, we were chilling. We were telling stories. We weren't proving. We weren't striving. We weren't networking. We weren't connecting. We weren't serving. We were just being. And it was beautiful. And it was in that moment that I said, guys, it's a great time right now. We've done some good this weekend because we partnered in some real, some things that had impact. But guys, I got to be honest. I'm tired. I'm weary. And I've been through a season of burnout. And our marriage has been through a season of some significant challenges and ups and downs. And I need some rest. And I'm kind of discovering that in a new way. And to which Brian responded and said, well, I got this cabin out west in Spearfish Canyon. Take it anytime you want. And I was like, tell me the next opening on the calendar because I'll be there. Next opening, or at least one that I could take, wasn't until a year later in 2019. But I took him up on it. I didn't forget. Took him up on it. And that only happened, I think, because of the crazy thing that happened the day after we met. So I'm with you guys, Luke, in 2018. I go back to Dallas, flying back from Sioux Falls down here to Dallas. I have a pre-scheduled meeting with a guy that I hadn't met, just kind of networking and connecting. We have a lunch. We walk out to the parking lot, and our friend Michael Perrin says to me, by the way, why were you in South Dakota yesterday? I said, well, I was up with some old friends. We did some ministry events. We screened the film that we just executive produced. Had a great time. And I said, honestly, I think I'll be back. I hadn't been back to South Dakota in years since our undergraduate days. And I said, I think we're going back. Some relationships are opening up things, and I just like the feel. So in fact, my buddy Brian invited me to his cabin out west. And Michael says, where out west? I said, well, in the Black Hills in western South Dakota. He goes, where in the Black Hills? I said, Spearfish Canyon, I think, somewhere in there. He goes, where in Spearfish Canyon? I'm like, I don't know. He just offered a cabin. I don't know where in the canyon it is. Michael goes, my family has a cabin in Spearfish Canyon, South Dakota. Check it out. Text Brian, text Michael. 3 minutes apart on the same road in Spearfish Canyon. And in that moment, obviously, it was like, wow, God's doing something. This is a revelation of some purpose right now for this time. And so a year later in 2019, we gathered. And instead of a solo retreat, which I thought it was going to be, because I love solo retreats, I love solitude, but really sensed that we need to invite some guys into it, as you and I talked about it more. Yeah. I think I shot an email out to about 100 guys around the country, and 10 guys came. We did it again in 2020. 20 guys came. And it was after that we realized, hey, there's something here. And a bunch of men spoke into our lives and said, you got to form this up and run with it. But, thinking back to that first retreat, Luke, what was your experience? What were your memories of that first retreat in 2019? Well, let's move into this field now. So one of the things that, as we journey together through this podcast, we're going to focus each week on what we call field note, which is essentially discovery that we've made in the field of life, as we've journeyed through to this point in our lives and through midlife especially. And it's really an investigation of a word that probably we take for granted or are unfamiliar with for a particular reason, but certainly are not acquainted with the deeper meanings of it. And that's where we really start to see life. It's like you see life when you can distill, when you can squeeze out the essence, when you can get to the nectar, to the marrow. That's where the life is. And that's what we're trying to do with these words. And some of them we happen upon just out in the field. Some of them are offered to us and something to explore. Either way, we take it up and we distill it down into a field note. And that's what we're going to move into here, as we'll do in all the forthcoming episodes of the podcast. And in this case, we're going to look at the word retreat. Retreat. A few years ago, I hit a point of serious depletion. I was officially in midlife, well past a decade of marriage, multiple children, increasing leadership and management responsibilities, pretty significant travel and meeting schedule. Things were beginning to wear down and crack. Important things, energy, emotion, enthusiasm, relationships. I could sense I needed to pull back. But we're conditioned to view retreats as weakness, if not flat-out failure. Retreating feels like a defeat to us, like an admission that we don't have what it takes to press through, overcome, achieve, win. At best, perhaps, it's an unproductive pocket of time that's a luxury we just can't afford. Until we realize that if we keep going as is, things around us will keep going too. and not for the better. The English word retreat comes from a Latin root meaning to draw back. A withdrawal is hardly a failure. It's a necessary response to circumstances. When you don't have the necessary force to win a battle, you draw back. When your strategic plan is run up against unforeseen developments, you pull back and pivot. When we hit a point of human weariness because of the realities of aging, of grief, of frenetic pace, of the burden of leadership, of an unforeseen transition, parenting challenges, of marriage strains, it is wisdom, not weakness, to invest in the fortifying and clarifying act of purposefully withdrawing, of resting, strengthening, of restoring vision, and rediscovering joy. I thought for a time that I was actually accomplishing this through the frequent conferences, conventions, and other professional confounds that many of us attend, viewing the break from the normal rhythms as enough of a recharge to pack up, sally forth back into the daily grind. A true personal retreat, however, is different. It's an intentional withdrawal to a place where the freedom of unscripted life can be experienced, where unplanned discoveries and encounters can happen. It's a time, place, where even if others are present, there's opportunity for solitude, when the still, soft voice of the spirit can actually be heard because the mind and heart are calm. It's a withdrawal from scheduled demands to sacred assisting. All Canyon Pathways retreat experiences are curated with this in mind. We come to these gatherings with different backgrounds, various experiences, but a common desire for belonging, understanding, and rest. The minimal scripting, maximized freedom, and dedicated attention to your spiritual needs opens up the mind and heart to receive from God not just rejuvenation, but a revelation of your sonship in the presence of other sons growing in theirs. Life as a son among other sons, so that we can lead as a father to those who need fathers. We invite you into this experience of freedom. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Isaiah 43:19. So there's our field note on retreat. And I'm so glad we're kicking it off, because that's how the Canyon Pathways mission and organization and global community started, was with a retreat. And it's been fundamental to my growth personally and us as a community. A couple of things that jumped out were just the nature, the import of retreating. There are times in life to retreat, and I think it's wisdom to see when those times are and to accept an invitation to do it. But, we started at the front end of that looking at how hard it can be. And it's hard. It's hard for us to either accept the invitation. It's hard for us to give ourselves permission to step away. And we're in the middle of it. We've got demands on our time, our energy, our intellect, our experience, our skills. It just seems like, if not an admission of defeat, like we said, a luxury that we just don't have. And yet we keep going in that mindset and things start breaking down. And I know that happened to me. Luke, what have you seen in that vein?
I think, for any of us, as we think about just the idea of when all your goals are to move forward and you've been told, that you've been given orders, you've been given, whether it be from yourself or from others, and you want to win, you want to succeed, it's hard to know when to stop. It's just hard to know. When do we say the difference between when are you waiting for God to open a door, or when are you just supposed to kick a door down? Those kind of ideas are difficult. But when are you supposed to say, no, I need to walk away from this? And to hear the Lord in that is difficult sometimes, I think, for a lot of guys. And it's just interesting. One of the great difficulties that I think, and this is is that this idea of retreat is a turning back from something. Just that turning back from something is really difficult. And in the Bible, it's the turning back is another idea of repentance. And in retreat and repentance, there is some funky relationship there that the inherent fear that comes with repentance, I think, can be same thing that comes with retreat, and both are wrong. We know in Acts they say, well, we repent so that what times of refreshing can come, and it's like, well, it's the same thing with retreat. When you retreat, you're coming back to a place where you're going to receive something, but yet at the same time, we fear that. We feel like it's failure. Repentance feels like failure. Retreat feels like failure. We get really, maybe it's a strategy of the enemy. We get really confused, and then we don't want to do the very thing that would give us life. Thought.
I think that's a great point, that can be a deception. We are always susceptible to deception from this adversary and this deceiver. And that's one of them. Because when you're living life, when you're in midlife leadership, I mean, in combat, you call it the fog of war. It's everything is upside down. It's a fog. And sometimes in our leadership and in different periods of our life, it's a fog. And so, yes, what is actually a good thing, a wise thing to retreat, because, hey, we don't have the force that we need here. We are at a disadvantage. We are depleted. We need to pull off the front line. It's hard to see that as a viable option sometimes. It's, in Band of Brothers, in fact, we quote this in the field note, which you can link to and find in the show notes at the bottom here. Dick Winters of the Easy Company, they just go into Holland, and it was a failed mission, and they had to retreat. And he says to his adjutant, he says, "I don't like retreating." And that can sum up, I think, how a lot of us kind of respond to the concept of retreating. I like it. And I think because it carries this connotation of weakness, or we confuse it with surrender. We're giving up. That a retreat is a quitting. And that's not what it is. It is a withdrawal from a particular circumstance to receive, to be strengthened, to be comforted, to gain wisdom, to be able to collect all the intel from our advisors, from our friends, and to come back to the same place stronger. And I know that's what I've experienced in retreating. And that's what we've run 16 retreats now around the world, which is amazing to me, Luke. I'm sure it's amazing to you too, as we sit here and reflect on it. Because again, 3 years ago, this was a brand new thing, and now we've touched 3 continents, gathered, and we've seen men go back into their marriages, into their leadership, into their spheres of influence, refreshed with new insight, with new wisdom, stronger, with less anxiety, with less fear, with more confidence, with greater connection to the Father, and a stronger sense of being a son. And that's what we get when we wisely retreat and accept the invitation to withdraw and receive.
I think about the difficulties, but also the reality that Jesus, when you said, would come away with, we're coming away, inviting guys to come away with. And Jesus did that with his disciples, and where we call it a retreat or getting away. The truth is, for me, I want to follow Jesus. There's a lot of things he did that I don't like to do. And one of them is retreating until I get there. When I get there, it's good. But Jesus did it. It was normal for him. He was refreshed. The disciples, they had to felt, on one hand, it was a privilege, and then it was like, what are we doing? And there's a pressing in there. I was like, man, what if that is just woven into the fabric of life, that we're supposed to be doing this, the rhythms, obviously.
Yeah, it's great. I love the point you made earlier about this is just part of the lifestyle that we see in the Son. He went away. He stepped back. He went out into a barren place. He went out into the wilderness. And there's just things that Jesus did that we don't want to do. We want to follow. We want to be a son, but we're like, I don't like that. That's hard. It's interesting to me that there is a retreat baked into our modern lifestyle, into our professions. And it's universal in this season of the global history that we live in. You know what it's called? It's called retirement. There is a giant retreat that's baked into everything our society and our professional outlook and careers and goals are going toward, and it's called retirement. But here's the thing. What do we have to do for that retreat, that retirement? We got to strive. We got to earn. We got to scrape together. It's something we're getting towards. Every day we're focused on, and yet we're losing joy in the moment. And that's really interesting. I mean, you start to really sit with that and break down how, you're an adversary and a deceiver. How could you keep people on a hamster wheel? Say, yeah, you can retreat. 20 years from now, when you get this number of zeros after the number, then you can go away. Then you can follow Jesus. Then you can do that thing. Then you can rest. Then you can receive distributions from that portfolio that you built and scraped together and earned and proved your worth. That's pretty powerful, man. That's, as we kind of come to the end here of our first episode, but that's maybe at the heartbeat, a nice way to end of what this Canyon Pathways community is about when we say live like a son, lead like a father, is right now rest. Right now receive. right now, come away and retreat and just do what the son does. You know, it's not a formula that we're following. It's not a curriculum. It's not a script. To live like a son, just look to the son. What did he do? And then when you hear his voice, just go with him and do it. Just come away, because we know that he's doing what the Father is showing him, revealing him, doing for him. And when we come back, we'll lead like that Father too. Friends, I hope you enjoyed this first episode. We recounted some of the moments of our origin story and the key elements of our mission and vision. And I hope you have one or two takeaways from our brief look at the concept of retreat and its centrality to this invitation into sonship. Check out the show notes for links to items we mentioned in this episode, as well as a PDF with discussion questions if you'd like to use this episode for personal reflection or in group meetings. Subscribe so you catch all of our episodes as we develop a language of sonship through this podcast, and to hear stories from men in midlife leadership around the globe. And as always, thanks for being a part of the Canyon Pathways community as we together live like sons and lead like fathers.